She has become one of the most followed political prisoners of our time, being incarcerated for over 20 years. Why is there so much secrecy behind this case? Why are they so afraid to let her out? What does she know? And why have they been so adamant on keeping her silenced and under extreme measures of security? Wrongfully imprisoned, subjected to the horrors of torture, and caught in what many call a strategic ploy by the US government, her story has moved millions around the world, all pleading for her release. This is a story of resilience, injustice, and a cry for freedom that refuses to be silenced. This is the case of Afiye Sıddıki. Before we explain who Dr. Afiye is, we first need to understand the context of how this all unfolded. It's the year 2001, and America has just witnessed a deep tragedy, one that would go on to reshape foreign policy, fuel wars, and usher in an era of pervasive surveillance. In its wake, Islamophobia would skyrocket, casting suspicion on millions of innocent Muslims and redefining societal attitudes for decades to come. Post 9/11, the FBI would intensify its crackdown on Muslims across the US, leading to numerous detentions and deportations, often without any formal charges. But where was Dr. Afiye during all of this? Afiye was an incredibly sharp student, and in the process of completing her PhD, having already earned her undergraduate degree from MIT and pursuing her doctoral studies at Brandeis University. She was described by her peers as a devout and studious woman, and at the time, passionate about speaking up for the lives lost in the Bosnian genocide, but never labeled as an extremist. But on September 17th, President George Bush would go on to sign a secret memo that granted the CIA unprecedented authority to target and dismantle groups suspected of planning terrorist activities, enabling covert operations that bypassed traditional legal frameworks. This allowed for an increase of surveillance, detentions, and a practice involving the abduction and transfer of suspects. In other words, kidnapping. It would be these specific powers that would later go on to enable the eventual abduction of Afiye in Pakistan. It's 2003. Dr. Afiye, a Pakistani national living in the US, was facing escalating pressure from the FBI. Given her activist role in university and her extensive knowledge of neuroscience, the FBI, in a cloud of post-9/11 paranoia, began to string a case against her, even knocking on her door, questioning her husband over an online purchase. So, she and her husband decided to return to Pakistan. It would be on this trip that the couple would eventually separate, whilst Afiye was pregnant with their third child. Now, on her way to Karachi airport, heading to Islamabad, Afiye and her family would be surrounded by cars as they were forcibly dragged out of their taxi. Her infant son, Suleiman, merely 6 months old at the time, vanished without a trace and is presumed deceased. Her 3-year-old daughter was transported to Afghanistan and placed in the care of an American Christian family under the guise of a new name, severing her from her roots. Meanwhile, her eldest child, a 6-year-old boy, was incarcerated in Kabul, subjected to threats of execution should he dare disclose his true identity. He was held there for 5 years. Afiye was transferred and imprisoned at Bagram in Afghanistan's infamous detention center, often referred to as the Guantanamo of the East, a facility shrouded in secrecy, operating outside the bounds of the US and international law. Till this day, America continues to deny any claims that Afiye was ever held in a secret prison in Afghanistan. This is where the story takes an even darker turn. While imprisoned, Afiye endured brutal beatings and rape at the hands of Afghan guards. And behind a one-way glass, she was led to believe that her children were being tortured, a psychological torment so intense that she pretended not to care as a way to cope. But how was Dr. Afiye so effortlessly apprehended? And what hidden roles did the US and Pakistan play in this dark and tangled web of events? America had implemented a bounty system, offering significant sums of money to those who turned over individuals suspected of terrorism. This became a lucrative, indiscriminate trade in human lives. In his memoir, In the Line of Fire, former Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf unabashedly admits that over half of the prisoners sent to Guantanamo Bay were sold to the Americans for these large bounties. In it, he proudly details how officials profited from these transactions, with no regard for their lives being exchanged. Justice was not only neglected, but commodified, leaving countless lives shattered in its wake. It's now the year 2010, and Dr. Afiye is extradited to America to stand trial. The US became relentless in its efforts to destroy her character. The media labeled her Lady Al-Qaeda, launching a campaign of character assassination. She was prosecuted for the attempted murder of 2 FBI agents, despite the lack of forensic evidence or DNA linking her to the alleged crime. Dr. Afiye is now serving 86 years in a Texas prison. Her sister has been working tirelessly to get her released to come home, with nearly 1 million people petitioning Joe Biden to release Afiye before his term as president concludes in the coming weeks. Dr. Afiye Sıddıki's story is one of profound tragedy, resilience, and enduring injustice. Caught in the crossfire of global politics, her life represents the devastating consequences of post-9/11 paranoia and the unchecked powers of a system that disregarded due process in its pursuit of security. From her abduction in Pakistan to her imprisonment in Bagram and eventual trial in the US, every chapter of Afiye's ordeal underscores a series of systemic failures, political manipulation, and countless human rights abuses. Dr. Afiye's case has gained the attention of millions from around the world, and there's still time and hope for her release.